The first time I realized something was off, it wasn't some dramatic moment. It was dinner, a normal, quiet, weeknight dinner. I'd made chicken, roasted potatoes, and the kind of green beans that still smell like butter even after they cool. The three of us sat at my dining table like we'd done plenty of times since my daughter moved back in. Plates clinking softly, the overhead light humming a little the way it always does in old houses. Then my son-in-law looked up from his food and said as casually as if he were asking for more salt, "So, that safe upstairs. What kind of lock is it?" The fork paused halfway to my mouth. My daughter, Megan, made a small, choking sound into her water glass. "Brian, why would you even ask that?" But he didn't look at her. He looked at me. Just waited, steady and patient, like the question was completely reasonable. I didn't answer right away. I set my fork down carefully. I could feel my own pulse in my throat, but I kept my face neutral. Brian gave me a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Just thinking about security," he said. "You know, with all the break-ins lately." "What break-ins?" I asked. I'd lived in this Columbus suburb for 15 years. The biggest neighborhood emergency we'd had recently was a downed tree branch that blocked Mrs. Klein's driveway for an afternoon. Brian waved his hand like I'd missed a memo. "They don't always put it out there. People try not to stir panic." He leaned forward, elbows on my table like we were two men sharing advice. "A guy your age living alone in a house this size, you've got to have some serious measures, right?" Megan shifted in her seat, uncomfortable. "Dad's careful." "Sure," Brian said, "but if something happened, God forbid, Megan would need to know where important things are, insurance, documents, that kind of stuff." He said it gently, even thoughtfully. Still, the room felt smaller. I watched him while he talked. The way his fingers tapped once on the table when I didn't respond. The way his eyes stayed locked on my face, waiting for a crack. "I have things organized," I said finally. "Megan knows what she needs to know." He nodded like he accepted that. Then he added very softly, "Does she know about the key?" Megan blinked. "What key?" I felt the heat rise behind my ribs, but I kept my voice even. "How do you know about any key?" For half a second his expression shifted. Not anger, something colder. Then the friendly mask slid back into place. "Aspirin," he said smoothly. "Last week, I had a headache. Megan told me to check your bathroom cabinet and I opened the wrong drawer by accident. Didn't mean anything by it." Megan nodded quickly like she wanted the air to clear. "Yeah, you were miserable that day." I remembered that day too. Brian had been upstairs a long time for someone looking for aspirin. "The aspirin's in the medicine cabinet," I said. "Same place it's always been." He smiled again, tight around the corners. "Must have been out of it." After that, dinner kept going, but Brian kept circling, not directly, carefully. Questions about whether I used online banking, who had spare keys, if I had cameras, whether I still went to the bank in person. Each one landed like a thumb pressed against a bruise. When we finished eating, Megan stood and started stacking plates. "I'll do the dishes tonight, Dad. You cooked." "I've got it," I said, already moving. Washing dishes is something I've always done when I need to think. Hot water, clean edges, order. Brian's hand settled on Megan's shoulder. "Come on," he said. "Let your dad handle his kitchen. We should get some sleep." They went upstairs to the guest room. Their door closed. I stood at the sink with the water running and listened to the house settle. Pipes ticking, the refrigerator hum low and steady. My own thoughts moving slower, sharper. In 3 weeks of them being back in my home, I'd brushed off a lot. Brian's job loss story that never quite had details. His interest in my routines, the way he looked at my living room like he was memorizing where everything sat. When the last plate was dry, I hung the towel back on its hook and turned off the kitchen light. The downstairs was quiet. I started up the stairs and that's when I saw it. My bedroom door was open, not wide, just a couple inches. A thin slice of darkness. I stopped on the top step with my hand on the banister. That door had been closed when we came down to eat. I always close it. Always. Megan and Brian were down the hall in the guest room. There was no reason for anyone to be in my bedroom. I stood there listening for any sound at all. Nothing. Just the old house and my heartbeat, steady and loud in my ears. Then I took one slow step toward that door and looked at the gap again, already knowing that somewhere in my house a small detail had shifted, and it wasn't going to shift back on its own. I didn't rush into the room. I stood there for a full count of 10, listening. Not for footsteps, those would have been obvious, but for the quieter signs people miss when they assume nothing is wrong. Breathing, fabric shifting, the soft impatience of someone waiting. There was nothing. I pushed the door open slowly. It didn't creak. I keep the hinges oiled. Always have. The room looked normal at first glance. The bed was still made, corners squared. My glasses were where I'd left them on the nightstand. The lamp was angled just right, throwing that soft yellow light I prefer in the evenings. But normal doesn't mean untouched. The closet door was open about 4 inches. I never leave it like that. Ever. It would bother me all night. The dresser drawers weren't flush. The second one down, where I keep documents, was pushed in just slightly crooked. Enough that I noticed without thinking. I walked over and pulled it open. Someone had been careful, not sloppy. Papers were put back close to where they belonged, but not exactly. Bank statements mixed with insurance forms, a folder that should have been in the back sitting closer to the front, and the small brass key I kept taped under the drawer lip, out of sight, out of habit, was gone. I checked twice. Ran my fingers along the wood where the tape used to be. Nothing. I didn't feel fear. Not yet. What I felt was clarity. This wasn't curiosity. It wasn't a mistake. Someone had come into my room with intent, searched with purpose, and taken exactly what they were looking for. I closed the drawer gently, left everything the way it was. If someone thought I hadn't noticed, I wanted them to keep thinking that. I moved to the closet and opened the safe. The digital lock still worked fine. That didn't matter anymore. The manual override existed for a reason, and now someone else knew about it. I stood there longer than I needed to, surrounded by old coats, boxes of photos, the quiet inventory of a life lived carefully. How many times had he been in here? How many questions had I answered without realizing I was giving away pieces of a map? I turned off the light and went through my usual routine. Pajamas, glasses off, alarm set, every movement deliberate, predictable. That predictability mattered. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the house breathe. Somewhere down the hall, Megan laughed softly at something Brian said. It sounded normal, comfortable. That made it worse. Just before midnight, I heard footsteps downstairs, slower than Megan's, heavier, controlled. I didn't move. Then I heard his voice, low, measured. "Yeah," Brian said. "It's me. Everyone's asleep." I slid my phone out from under the pillow and turned on the recorder without looking at the screen. Air vents carry sound in old houses. You learn that if you've lived in one long enough. "The old guy's got more than I thought," Brian continued. "Bank stuff, investments, it's all there." My hand stayed steady. He wasn't guessing. He was reporting. "Tomorrow night works," he said. "Megan's book club. Same time as always." There was a pause, then a laugh, short, dismissive. "He won't notice. Guys like him never do." I let the phone record. Let the silence do its work. When the call ended, I waited. Listened to his footsteps return upstairs. Heard the guest room door close. Only then did I stop the recording and set the phone face down on the nightstand. I didn't sleep after that. I lay there until morning, not angry, not panicked, just sorting facts. Someone had planned this. Carefully, quietly, and they believed I was the weakest variable in the room. By the time the light crept in through the blinds, I already knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to confront anyone yet. Not until I understood exactly how far this went. Morning came the same way it always did. 6:30, no alarm needed, the house still quiet. Coffee first, then eggs. I moved through the kitchen slowly, deliberately, keeping every habit exactly where it belonged. If anyone was watching, listening, that mattered. Megan came down a little after 7, hair still damp from the shower, wearing one of her old college sweatshirts. She smiled when she saw me. "Morning, Dad." "Morning," I said. "Sleep okay?" "Like a rock." She poured coffee and leaned against the counter. "Thank you again for letting us stay here. I know it's an adjustment." Brian came down later, clean shirt, relaxed posture. The confidence of someone who believed the night before had gone exactly as planned. He sat across from me and wrapped his hands around his mug. "Big plans today?" "Nothing special," I said. "A few errands." His eyes sharpened just slightly. "What kind of errands?" "Hardware store, bank." Megan laughed. "Dad still likes doing things in person, old school." "Careful," I said mildly. "Nothing wrong with knowing where your money is." Brian nodded too quickly. "Absolutely. Especially these days." He watched me more closely after that. Every word, every movement. I let him. When breakfast was done, he announced he had calls to make about job leads. Megan headed upstairs to organize boxes. That gave me space. I went to the garage, closed the door, and sat in my car for a moment without starting it. Then I listened to the recording again. Not because I needed to, but because details matter. Tone, timing, words people choose when they think no one is holding them accountable. By the time I pulled out of the driveway, I wasn't guessing anymore. I had a timeline. Step 1 was simple. I moved the real safe key. Not somewhere clever, somewhere boring. A place no one ever searches because it doesn't feel important. That's a lesson you learn early in life. Step 2 was documentation. I'd spent most of my working years as a compliance auditor for a regional insurance firm. Quiet job. Paper heavy. People underestimate that kind of work. They think authority looks loud. It doesn't. It looks like records that don't argue. By mid-morning, I had copies of my financial statements printed and dated, photos taken, account access logged. I wanted a clean before. Step 3 took a little creativity. At the hardware store, I didn't rush. I walked the aisles, read labels, thought through mechanics. When I found what I needed, I didn't smile. I just put it in the cart and paid in cash. Back home, the house was empty. A note from Megan sat on the counter. "Gone out for groceries, back around 2. Love you." Perfect. I worked in my basement workshop where I've fixed everything from broken chairs to leaky valves for decades. Simple tools, good lighting, quiet. I tested the mechanism twice, then a third time. Predictable, reliable, no damage, no risk. That mattered. I reset everything, cleaned up, and went upstairs. The dresser drawer looked exactly as it always had. Innocent. Ordinary. If someone opened it with purpose, though, it would tell the truth. When Megan and Brian got back, I greeted them the same way I always did. No tension, no questions, no change in routine. Brian glanced upstairs once while he carried in grocery bags. Just once. That told me enough. By late afternoon, I made one more stop, an electronics store near the freeway. I told the clerk I needed a small camera. Nothing fancy, motion activated, quiet. "Lot of people buying these lately," he said. "I imagine," I replied. Back home, I installed it carefully, tested angles, checked audio, made sure it would only wake when it needed to. When I was done, I sat on the edge of my bed and looked around the room. It looked the same. That was the point. Downstairs, I could hear Brian laughing at something on TV. Comfortable, certain. He thought tonight was already decided. I turned the light off, closed the door, and waited. Dinner that night was quiet, not awkward, just measured. Megan talked about a new position opening at the library downtown. Brian nodded along, checked his phone more than usual. I ate slowly, let the rhythm settle. Fork, chew, sip of water, nothing out of place. Around 8, I stood and rubbed my temple. "Long day," I said. "I think I'll turn in early." "That's probably smart," Megan said. "You've been running around non-stop." Brian looked up immediately. You take anything to help you sleep? I paused, just long enough to be natural. Sometimes. Doctor gave me something mild, works well. His shoulders relaxed. He tried to hide it. Didn't quite succeed. Good, he said. Rest is important. Upstairs, I changed clothes, turned down the bed, and left the light on longer than usual. Then I lay back fully dressed, phone in my hand, camera feed open and silent. This part was about patience. Silence is only useful if you control it. I waited. Downstairs, the television murmured. Then, Megan's footsteps. The guest room door. Quiet again. Time stretched. Midnight passed. 1 a.m. At 2:42, the motion alert flickered. Brian appeared on my screen like a shadow learning how to move. Shoes off, steps placed where the floor stayed quiet. He paused at my door longer than anyone who belonged there ever would. I kept my breathing slow, even. The door opened. He stood in the doorway watching me, counting, measuring. Then he moved, straight to the dresser, no hesitation. He pulled the drawer open and reached inside with confidence, the kind that comes from believing the end is already written. The device triggered instantly. A sharp pop, a sudden burst. Glitter, fine, bright, impossible to miss, exploded upward and outward, coating his hands, his chest, his face. Brian stumbled back, swearing under his breath. I sat up and turned on the lamp. "What's going on?" I asked, calm and clear. He froze. Silver and gold sparkled in his hair, on his shirt, in the lines of his face. He looked ridiculous and trapped. "I heard a noise," he said quickly. "Thought someone broke in." I looked at the open drawer, then at him. "In my dresser?" Before he could answer, Megan appeared in the doorway, robe pulled tight around her. "What happened?" she asked, then stopped. Her eyes went straight to Brian, then to the glitter, then back to him. "Why are you in my father's bedroom?" she said. Brian opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. "I was checking on him." "At 3 in the morning?" Her voice didn't rise. It sharpened. I reached for my phone and stood. "Megan," I said, "there's something you need to hear." Brian took a step forward. "Don't." "Enough," she said without looking at him. "Dad?" I pressed play. Brian's voice filled the room, calm, confident, careless. The words did all the work. I didn't watch him. I watched my daughter. The moment she understood came quietly. No scream, no collapse. Just a long breath that didn't come back the same. When the recording ended, she looked at him like he was a stranger standing in the wrong house. "You planned this," she said. "You planned to steal from my father." He tried to explain, to minimize, to pivot. She raised a hand. "Stop." The room went still. "Get your things," she said, "and leave." He didn't argue, not really. He just looked smaller, less certain. When the door finally closed behind him, Megan sat down heavily on the edge of my bed. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't see it." I sat beside her. "You weren't meant to." We stayed there in silence for a while. Then I got up, closed the dresser drawer, and turned off the light. Order, slowly returning. Outside the bedroom, the house was quiet again, and for the first time all day, I allowed myself to breathe. Brian didn't leave immediately. I could hear him in the guest room, drawers opening too hard, hangers scraping the rod. The sound carried down the hallway in short, angry bursts. Megan stayed seated, hands folded in her lap, staring at the floor like she was rereading something she wished she hadn't seen. I didn't rush her. Confrontations don't need pressure to work. They need structure. After a few minutes, she stood. Her shoulders were straighter now, not stiff, decided. "I'm going to tell him what happens next," she said. "I'll come with you," I replied. We walked down the hall together. Brian was stuffing clothes into a duffel bag, glitter still clinging to his sleeves and hair. It followed him everywhere now. Evidence that didn't argue back. Megan stopped in the doorway. "Leave your key on the counter," she said, "and your phone." Brian laughed once, sharp and short. "You don't get to take my phone." "You don't get to negotiate," she replied, calm, flat. You planned a felony in this house. I'm deciding how this ends. He looked at me then, really looked. You planned this, he said. You set me up. I documented you, I corrected. There's a difference. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I have the recording, I continued. Time-stamped, clear audio, your words, your plan, your timeline. I held up my phone, not as a threat, just as an object, like paperwork. You can leave quietly, I said, or we can add another step. Brian swallowed. His confidence didn't break all at once. It drained, slowly, like air leaking from something that was never as solid as it looked. Megan stepped closer to him. You lied to me about the job, about the debt, about why we came here. I was trying to fix it, he said. I was under pressure. By stealing from my father? She asked. Silence did the rest. He dropped the phone on the dresser, then the key on top of it. The sound was small, final. When he passed us on the way out, he didn't meet either of our eyes. The front door closed. The lock turned. I waited a full 10 seconds before moving. Old habit. Then I walked to the kitchen and picked up the key and phone, placed them side by side on the counter and slid them into a drawer. Megan sat at the table, staring at nothing. Tomorrow, I said gently, we'll make calls, one step at a time. She nodded. I don't want him contacting me. He won't, I said. Not without consequences. That night, neither of us slept much. Not from fear, from recalibration. In the morning, we made a list. Not emotional, practical. Step 1, freeze joint accounts. Step 2, document debts. Step 3, attorney consultation. Facts first, feelings later. By noon, the shape of the situation had changed. It wasn't chaos anymore. It was a process. That's when Megan finally exhaled. Thank you, she said, for not exploding, for not panicking. I nodded. Panic confuses things. We sat in the quiet kitchen, sunlight moving slowly across the table. Outside, a delivery truck passed. Somewhere down the block, someone laughed. Life continuing. And this time, nothing hidden was left to surface. 3 weeks later, the house felt different. Not emptier, just settled. Megan's attorney handled the separation efficiently. There was no dramatic fight over property. There wasn't much to fight over once the debts were laid out in clean columns and dates. Brian didn't contest anything. He couldn't afford to, financially or otherwise. The recording mattered, not because we waved it around, but because it existed. It anchored every conversation in reality. No guessing, no rewriting history. When facts are clear, arguments shrink. Megan moved her money into a separate account, closed 2 credit lines she hadn't known existed. The bank manager spoke gently, professionally, the way people do when they understand something personal has gone wrong but don't need the details. One afternoon, a uniformed officer stopped by, not to arrest anyone, just to document. Statement taken, recording logged, timeline confirmed, order again. Brian sent one message through his lawyer, short, defensive, then nothing. The silence after that wasn't heavy, it was clean. Megan stayed with me, not because she had nowhere else to go, but because routine matters when you're resetting. She took a temporary position at the local library, early mornings, quiet work. She started sleeping better, so did I. One evening, we cleaned the guest room together, folded sheets, labeled boxes, vacuumed glitter out of corners that would probably sparkle for years. She laughed softly at that. Guess we'll always have a reminder. Some lessons linger, I said. Before bed that night, I walked through the house the way I always do. Doors checked, lights off, safe untouched. I paused in my bedroom and looked at the dresser, just a piece of furniture again, nothing waiting inside it. I turned off the lamp and stood in the dark for a moment, listening. No footsteps, no whispers, no calculations happening in the quiet, just a house being a house. And that was enough. A few months passed. Mornings returned to their old shape. Coffee first, newspaper folded just once, the sound of Megan moving around upstairs, getting ready for work, steady and unhurried. She kept the library job, liked the quiet, the predictability. She said it reminded her that not everything in life needs to be complicated to matter. Some evenings we ate together. Other nights we didn't. No explanations needed. Just shared space without tension. One Saturday, I reorganized the basement shelves, labeled a few old boxes, threw out things I'd been meaning to part with for years. It felt good, choosing what stayed. Megan helped without being asked. While we worked, she mentioned a coworker, older, recently widowed, letting a distant relative help manage things. "He seems nice," she said, "but something about it made me think of us." I nodded, didn't say much. Awareness has a way of spreading quietly. That night, after the house was still, I walked through my usual routine, checked doors, turned off lights, put the phone face down on the counter. Nothing to guard against anymore, just order. Before you go, if this story stayed with you, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. It helps more than you'd think. And if you're comfortable, let us know in the comments what city you're watching from and what time it is where you are right now. 2 more stories are waiting for you next. One about quiet leverage, another about patience paying off. Thank you for listening.